Breaking news. Jerry Yang comforting Tong Liya backstage after a career-defining performance. The theater had fallen into silence, then erupted into thunderous applause that shook the very rafters of the grand auditorium. Tong Liya, standing alone on the center stage, her chest rising and falling with exhaustion and exhilaration, let the spotlight caress her face as tears welled in her eyes. She had just finished the performance critics would later call career-defining, a hauntingly powerful portrayal of a woman broken by love yet rebuilt by her own will. Her body trembled, not just from the physical demands of the role, but from the sheer emotional toll it had taken. The weight of years away from the stage, of whispers questioning her comeback, of sleepless nights rehearsing every single breath and gesture, all of it now came crashing down. She bowed once, twice, and a third time, before slipping behind the velvet curtain, her elegant figure disappearing into the shadows. And there, waiting for her like an anchor in the storm, was Jerry Yang, a backstage sanctuary. The backstage corridor was dimly lit, lined with ropes, scattered costumes, and the faint smell of stage paint. Yet it was alive with electricity. Crew members rushed about with walkie-talkies, makeup artists whispered congratulations, and fellow cast members exchanged proud embraces. But for Tong Liya, it all blurred into a haze. Her knees nearly buckled from the intensity of what she had just lived through on stage. Jerry caught her instantly, his hand steady on her arm, his eyes locking onto hers. "You did it," he whispered, his voice calm yet trembling with emotion. Tong Liya, still gasping for breath, shook her head. "I don't know if I." "You did," Jerry cut in, firm yet gentle, his eyes glistening with pride. "You didn't just perform tonight. You bathed your soul. Everyone out there felt it. I felt it." For a moment, she simply stood there, her forehead leaning against his chest, her hands clutching the fabric of his coat. Jerry held her tightly, shielding her from the chaos of backstage with the quiet strength of someone who understood her fears better than anyone. The weight of expectation. Tong Liya had been away from major stage productions for years. Her career had shifted toward film and television, and after becoming a mother, she faced constant speculation. Could she return to the grueling demands of theater? Would audiences still see her as the radiant actress who once dominated the stage? Tonight's performance was her answer. Yet the price had been high. In the weeks leading up, Jerry had witnessed it all. Her rehearsing until her voice cracked, her breaking down in the middle of the night when she couldn't nail a scene, her silent moments of doubt when she stared at herself in the mirror and whispered, "What if I fail?" And Jerry, ever the quiet supporter, the man known to the world as a star himself, chose to stay in the shadows, pouring his strength into her. He cooked her meals when she forgot to eat, rehearsed lines with her until dawn, and reminded her, again and again, that she was born for this stage. Tonight, watching her collapse into his arms after conquering it all, he felt his chest tighten with a mixture of relief and awe. A whispered moment. The noise backstage grew louder, producers calling her name, fellow actors wanting to congratulate her, journalists hovering at the edges, ready for quotes. But Jerry, sensing her fragile state, gently guided her to a quiet corner of the dressing room. There, under the warm glow of a single vanity light, Tong Liya finally let her tears flow freely. "It was too much," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I felt like I was going to drown out there." Jerry knelt in front of her, taking her trembling hands into his. "But you didn't drown. You sailed. Liya, do you know what you did tonight? You silenced every doubt, every voice that ever questioned you. The woman I saw on that stage, she was unstoppable." Tong Liya's lips quivered as she tried to smile through her tears. "You really think so?" Jerry's gaze never wavered. "I don't just think so. I know so. And one day, when people talk about this night, they'll remember it as the moment Tong Liya redefined what it means to come back stronger." The mirror scene. As she wiped her tears, Tong Liya turned toward the mirror in front of her. Her makeup was smudged, her hair slightly undone. But in her reflection, she saw something she hadn't in years: fire. She touched the glass lightly, as if reaching for the woman she had just become on stage. Jerry stood behind her, his reflection towering yet soft, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Their eyes met in the mirror, haze red from crying, his warm and steady. It was as if the entire world melted away, leaving only the truth of two souls who had fought battles side by side, even when the spotlight belonged to just one of them. "You're glowing," he murmured. She chuckled softly, shaking her head. "I look a mess." "To me," he said, his voice low and certain, "you've never looked more beautiful." The embrace that spoke volumes. As a knocking on the door grew louder, journalists begging for an interview, the director asking for her presence at the after-party, Jerry wrapped his arms around her one last time before letting her go. "Take your time," he whispered into her hair. "The world can wait. Right now, just breathe." Tong Liya clung to him for a moment longer, drawing strength from the heartbeat she could feel against her cheek. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to sink into the embrace. Not as an actress, not as a comeback story, but simply as a woman who had given everything she had and found someone waiting for her in the wings. A night to remember. When she finally emerged from the dressing room, flanked by Jerry at her side, the backstage corridor erupted into cheers. Cast and crew applauded, makeup artists cried, and even the stage director allowed himself a rare smile. Cameras flashed, capturing the radiance in her tear-streaked face. But what none of those cameras caught, what belonged only to the two of them, was the quiet moment earlier, when Jerry Yang had held Tong Liya together after she nearly broke under the weight of her triumph. It was a reminder that behind every breathtaking performance, there are unseen stories of vulnerability, of fear, and of love. And on this night, the world saw Tong Liya as a phoenix reborn, but Jerry Yang saw her simply as the woman he loved, and he was proud to be the one who caught her when the flames nearly consumed her. Epilogue: a legacy born in shadows. Long after the applause faded and the after-party lights dimmed, the story of that night lived on. Critics hailed Tong Liya's performance as one of the greatest stage moments in modern Chinese theater. Fans replayed the standing ovation, marveling at her emotional range. But in private conversations, whispers spread of Jerry Yang's quiet presence backstage, that he had been her rock, her shield, her comfort. Some fans even said the most beautiful performance of the night wasn't the one under the spotlight, but the one in the shadows, where a man held a woman as she wept with exhaustion and victory intertwined. And perhaps they were right, because sometimes the truest art is not seen by the world. It is felt in the silent embrace between two souls who know that every triumph is sweeter when shared. The ovation had ended. The curtain had dropped. Yet for Tong Liya, the night was far from over. After Jerry Yang's steady embrace backstage, an embrace that had stitched her broken nerves back together, she was expected to walk into a room blazing with lights, champagne, journalists, and the weight of expectation all over again. The after-party was not just a celebration. It was an unofficial press conference, a battlefield where appearances mattered as much as performances. But this time, she was not walking in alone. Jerry Yang was by her side. Entering the after-party, the ballroom of the Grand Beijing Theater had been transformed into a golden dream. Chandeliers glowed overhead, violins played softly in the corner, and waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne. The air buzzed with conversation, critics dissecting her performance, actors laughing too loudly, producers already scheming about their next big show. And then, as if on cue, the doors opened. Tong Liya entered, wearing a long silk gown that shimmered like water under the golden light. Her hair was loosely swept back, still showing signs of her exhausting stage battle. But her eyes carried a new fire that made heads turn instantly. And just behind her, slightly taller, his presence magnetic yet calm, Jerry Yang. A ripple went through the room. Murmurs rose. Cameras clicked. "Is that Jerry Yang?" someone whispered. "He came for her performance," another added. "They look close." Tong Liya felt the eyes on her like invisible hands pulling her apart, but Jerry's steady palm on the small of her back anchored her. He didn't push her forward, nor did he overshadow her. Instead, he walked with her, allowing her to remain the star while he was the quiet storm by her side. Conversations in the crowd. The first wave of admirers descended almost immediately. Directors, Fellow actors and journalists circled her like moth to a flame, showering her with praise. Tong Liya, tonight was history in the making. I cried during your final scene. You were extraordinary. You've redefined yourself. Congratulations. She smiled graciously, thanked them all. But inside, she felt her knees weaken. It was overwhelming. Jerry noticed. He subtly reached for a glass of water and placed it in her hand before anyone else could. The gesture was small, but it didn't go unnoticed. A female journalist, sharp-eyed and quick-tongued, caught the detail. Jerry Yang, she said, tilting her head with a sly smile. We didn't expect to see you here tonight. Are you two working on a project together? Jerry's lips curved into the kind of half-smile that gave nothing away yet spoke volumes. I came to watch her shine, he said simply. The journalist raised an eyebrow. Her curiosity piqued, but before she could probe further, another producer pulled Tong Liya away. Still, whispers began threading through the room. A dance in the spotlight. Later in the evening, as champagne flowed and the orchestra shifted into a slower, more romantic tune, the host of the event announced a celebratory dance in honor of Tong Liya. The crowd clapped, urging her onto the dance floor. Tong Liya hesitated. The idea of gliding under the eyes of critics and cameras after such an emotionally exhausting night felt daunting. But then, Jerry extended his hand. May I? He asked softly, his eyes steady on hers. She hesitated, her heart pounding. Accepting his hand meant more than just a dance. It meant stepping into a different kind of spotlight, the kind that fed rumors and speculation. But the warmth in his gaze reminded her of the moment backstage, when his embrace had been the only thing keeping her together. So she placed her hand in his. The orchestra swelled. Gasps echoed around the room. And then the two of them moved, slow, graceful, almost cinematic. Tong Liya's gown swept across the floor like liquid silk. Jerry guided her effortlessly, his hand firm yet tender at her waist. They moved as if no one else existed, as if the ballroom had vanished and they were back in that quiet dressing room, breathing only for each other. Every turn, every step spoke volumes. He wasn't just leading her in a dance. He was holding her up, reminding her with every movement that she was not alone. By the time the song ended, the room was spellbound. Applause broke out, but it was different from the thunderous ovation at the theater. This was quieter, tinged with something more: curiosity, suspicion, admiration. Behind the balcony doors, after the dance, Tong Liya slipped out onto the balcony, seeking fresh air. The Beijing night sky stretched endlessly, stars flickering faintly above the city lights. The cool air kissed her flushed cheeks, and for the first time that night, she exhaled deeply. Moments later, Jerry joined her, closing the balcony doors behind them. The muffled noise of the party faded, leaving them in a cocoon of quiet. Are you holding up? He asked gently. She nodded, though her voice betrayed her. It's just a lot. Everyone's watching. Every smile feels rehearsed. Every word feels like a test. Jerry stepped closer, his presence enveloping her. Then stop rehearsing. Stop performing. Just breathe. It's only me, hey. She turned to him, her eyes shimmering with vulnerability. Sometimes I wish I could stay in these moments forever, the ones where it's just us and no one else is watching. Jerry's gaze deepened. For a fleeting second, the distance between them thinned, charged with unspoken words. The city lights reflected in his eyes as he whispered, "Then let's make these moments last, no matter where we are." Her breath caught, and though she didn't respond with words, the way her hand lingered near his told him everything. The return inside. When they finally re-entered the ballroom, something had changed. They weren't holding hands, but the electricity between them was palpable, and people noticed. Heads turned, conversations hushed, and the whispers grew louder. Look at them. Did you see the balcony? They dance like they've known each other forever. Are they more than friends? Tong Liya heard the murmurs but chose to hold her head high. For once, she didn't feel weighed down by them. Jerry walked slightly behind her, close enough that his shadow overlapped hers. To the outside world, it was subtle. To her, it felt like a shield, an unexpected toast. The host of the evening raised his glass, calling for silence. Tonight, we celebrate not just a performance, but a triumph of spirit. To Tong Liya, who reminded us of the magic of live theater. Glasses clinked, and cheers filled the air. Tong Liya blushed, raising her glass politely. But then, unexpectedly, Jerry lifted his as well. To Tong Liya, he said, his voice carrying through the room, for proving that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to walk through it anyway. You didn't just return to the stage tonight, you claimed it as your own, and we're all lucky to have witnessed it. The room erupted in applause, but this time, it wasn't just for her, it was for them. For the man who had spoken with such raw admiration, and for the woman who had clearly inspired it. Tong Liya's cheeks burned, but in her heart, warmth spread like wildfire. Jerry had always been her quiet supporter in the shadows. Tonight, he had stepped into the light, not to overshadow her, but to honor her. The night's final scene. As the after-party wound down and guests began to leave, Jerry quietly fetched her coat and draped it over her shoulders. It was a gesture so intimate, so protective, that even the most seasoned gossip columnists couldn't help but notice. On their way out, flashes of cameras followed them, questions hurled into the air. Jerry, are you and Tong Liya together? Is this the start of a new on-screen partnership, or something more? Tong Liya, how important was Jerry's presence tonight? Tong Liya paused, her hand brushing against Jerry's as she turned toward the cameras. Her smile was poised, but her words carried a double meaning. Tonight was about finding strength in the places you least expect. I'm grateful, more than words can say. The cameras clicked furiously, capturing the moment. And as they finally slipped into the quiet of Jerry's waiting car, the world outside buzzed with speculation. But inside, away from the flashes and the whispers, silence stretched comfortably between them. Jerry reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. No words were needed. The night had already spoken for them. Epilogue, whispers that wouldn't fade. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Tong Liya stuns in career-defining performance, but all eyes on Jerry Yang's support. Dance of intimacy, Jerry Yang and Tong Liya spark romance rumors at afterparty. Behind the curtain, is this the beginning of a new power couple? For fans, it was exhilarating. For critics, it was fuel for endless columns. But for Jerry and Tong Liya, it was simpler than all that. Because when the curtain had fallen and the applause had died, the only truth that mattered was this. In the shadows of a triumph, he had been there, not as a co-star, not as a headline,